all for coming this evening or this afternoon. My name is Chris Furnari. I'm the editor of Brewbound, and this is Brew Talk CBC 2018. Thank you. Yeah. Thanks, Sam. First and foremost, big shout out to Dogfish Head for helping set this whole thing up. Without you guys, we wouldn't be doing this, and we're doing this for 2 years. 3 events each year in 18 and 19, and then maybe we'll talk about 2020. Might have to renegotiate. Might have to have a bigger venue because we have so many people here today. Thank you guys for coming. A couple of housekeeping items before we get started. Already thanked Dogfish, but also wanted to thank Orchestrated Beer and some of our other sponsors. We have Ampco Pumps, Thielman, Vicinity Brew, PFE, EPR Properties, Happy Cog, and Athletic Event Supply. Thank you guys for helping make this event possible. Without you, we wouldn't have our entire Brewbound staff here checking people in and making this event run smoothly. We wouldn't have my good friend Josh Pratt back there fixing our live stream and making it work. Our videographer Dave floating around grabbing footage. So a big round of applause to our sponsors and the entire Brewbound team. And with that, let's jump right in. With more than 6,300 breweries now competing in the marketplace, identifying a core set of consumers and turning them into loyal brand advocates at a time when the beer category has never been more crowded is, at this point, nearly impossible. Today's craft beer environment is challenging. Consumers have been conditioned to constantly seek new and different offerings, which has led to the rotation nation phenomenon that you guys are all no doubt aware of. And that brought with it an entire generation of drinkers who rarely order the same beer twice. So, how do you cut through the clutter and emerge as a brand and stand apart from the rest? That's what our first group of panelists are here to discuss today. We've got 3 of the brightest marketing and brand building minds in craft here to share with you some of their strategies and insights. Each of their companies are taking unique approaches to building brands through integrated sports marketing partnerships, holiday-based promotions, and the ever-growing trend of direct-to-consumer sales opportunities. Today's Brew Talk speakers will have a different way, all have a different way of elevating their brands and driving consumer interest. So without further ado, please welcome to the stage Dogfish Head Vice President of Marketing Neal Stewart, Trillium Brewing co-founder J.C. Tetreault, and Boulevard Brewing Vice President of Marketing Natalie Gershon. And I don't know if you guys need beers, but maybe we can get some beers for them.
Yes.
Yes.
Little sequence.
Neal, you feel so far away over there. You have like your own table.
Yeah.
We pulled Neal.
I got to do my Instagram story real quick. Hang on.
Oh, yeah. The marketing guy. I forgot. Yeah.
I want to thank you for the 45 minutes notice on our questions. It was very kind of you.
Well, we don't want scripted responses, Neal.
We're very prepared.
So we managed to pull Neal off the beach for 45 minutes to talk with us. We can go back and forth all day if you want.
Let's do it.
No, let's actually dive into the meat of what we want to get to today. As I mentioned, 6,300 breweries. How much tougher is it to stand out nowadays, and how much has the evolution of the marketplace changed the way that you all market to a completely new set of consumers? And I'll start with Neal since you're the co-host here.
Let me get my notes out here.
No scripted responses, Neal.
So yeah, I mean it's really difficult these days. There are so many breweries out there. What we found is that if you want to kind of market yourself through sponsorships, a lot of sponsorships are locked up. So you have to do a pretty good job of conducting some due diligence to find the ones that are right for your brand. I think for us, standing out is it's a constant battle. You have to be active year round. It's not like the old days where you could kind of scale up your marketing efforts during the summer months or whenever you're selling a higher percentage of your beer. So it's a 12-month battle year in and year out.
Natalie, how are you guys doing it at Boulevard? You guys have an awesome partnership with the Royals, I know, and you got your fingers in a lot of different opportunities. So maybe tell our crowd about it.
Yeah, I would say very similarly. Carving out white space is difficult at best. Finding organically, authentically fitting white space is even harder. But the push, the everyday, the 365. There isn't non-beer selling, non-beer drinking season. So I think it's about pushing on the right levers and the right beers at the right time, especially for us, focusing on what's seasonal and what's appropriate and giving consumers something to grasp onto and really engage with at the right time of the year. So that's worked best for us, I would say. Yeah.
JC, you don't have to do any marketing because you have like one of the best breweries in the world at this point, right? So it must be really easy to sell beer at Trillium.
Well, that's setting me up for being very sweaty palmed right now. I mean, we're just a mom and pop shop. I know it's a little obnoxious to kind of hear me say that, but we do our best to kind of just react. We just do our best to react to what people say that they want from us. And we have a pretty short cycle between who the customer is standing in front of us and the brewer, me. I'm there every day. I listen to what people say, and we kind of react to that and make sure that it's the most optimal intersection between what feels right to me and what people tell us that they want from us.
And how much of your business now is direct to consumer?
It varies week to week, month to month, but it's 95+%.
And I got to imagine that you're one of the few breweries probably in the industry that's able to get away with that. Is that something that you attribute to the brand that you've built, the marketplace that you're in? What is it?
The short answer is kind of all of the above. It's where craft beer is today, but also where it was when we started 5 years ago. I remember sitting at my desk at my old job where I used to manage clinical research. And my phone was pinging, and people were posting on Beer Advocate what the line was like at the Alchemist for Heady Topper that day, and it was Tuesday at 2:00 in the afternoon, and it was unbelievable. I was kind of doing the quick math, and I was running over to my buddy who also liked craft beer, and I couldn't imagine that there was enough people in the world to buy enough beer from that one place in this remote place in Vermont. And it's not necessarily that we designed our business like that, but we kind of, it was a thing that we saw, for sure.
Yeah. And you're sort of riding the wave now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Natalie, you guys don't have the pleasure of being able to sell 95% of all your beer directly to consumers.
Nope.
But you do have to deal with a lot of different breweries and compete in a lot of different markets. Can you talk to me a little bit about how you guys choose your sort of home and away strategies as it relates to marketing and brand building? What differs close to home versus markets that might be, several hundred miles away?
Absolutely. Boulevard started 29 years ago, so it was the brewery in Kansas City, and we had the honor of being one of the first breweries in the Midwest. So it was the home beer for so many markets and so many people, and that's drastically changed now. And we love that because we love that beer is such a rich industry, and there's so much competitiveness, and there's so much elevation of the category. But it has definitely kind of applied some pressure to us, which is awesome. It allows us to rise to the challenge. It also allows our brewers to some drive to make awesome, better beers. So home and away, they don't differ drastically, with the exception of that home, I would say, is our strategy amplified about 1,000%. So away, we really lead with our higher end, our smokestack offerings, keep it pretty focused on those. Fewer offerings, more specific strategy, if you will, tighter programming, a more consistent narrative. At home, it's that plus everything else. There's a lot of, especially in Kansas City, Omaha, Des Moines, St. Louis, there's a lot of home market celebration, a lot we do in the community that feels hyper-local. Our work with the Kansas City Royals is a good example of that. That doesn't travel well, but where it is, it sells an absolute ton of beer for us, and it gives us something really special to grasp onto. But there are definitely two different strategies, not super different, but amplified at best.
Is it fair to say that you let the product, the Boulevard products, drive a lot of what you guys are doing on the marketing side?
Yes and no. I would say we definitely lead with the product and the story behind it and where we think that moment is best consumed, whether it's camping or at a concert. We're kind of all about the moments, which is celebrated and first and foremost driven by the beer. But I would say that probably is where we kind of focus on, kind of the beer in the moment.
Sure. Neal, letting moments drive a lot of the marketing decision. I'm drinking a Sequench right now, but this is the beer of Warrior Dash. So what is it about that moment that Dogfish was attracted to, and how do you guys start to identify the occasions that you want to align your brand with?
Yeah, so I mean, I'll kind of speak to the process more than like what decisions we're actually making, but we have a term that we call the four-way win, and what that means is we make decisions based on what's right for the consumer, what's right for the brand, what's right for Dogfish, which is not the brand, it's what's right for our coworkers, because we consider that kind of an audience as well. And then we also think about what's right for our distributor and retail partners. And when we think about that, we have to kind of check the box in all four of those categories. And when we find something that does that, then we start to look at, what ROI does that deliver? Does that meet certain metrics that we think are attractive for the brand and make sense for all those groups involved?
So it kind of seems like you're taking more of a rifle versus a shotgun approach. You're highly selective about the types of partnerships that you want to get involved in, where you want to have your beer placed alongside which occasions. We see a lot of companies that are, so hungry to get their brand out in front of consumers that they're almost willing to say yes to anything. What are sort of the upsides and downsides of both approaches, being too specific or being not specific enough?
Well, I'm a believer that you have to stand for something or you stand for nothing. So, what we've done is we've been very thoughtful about, what consumer segments we're actively targeting. And, those consumer segments can be different by brand. For Sequench Ale, it's a different consumer segment than it might be for 60-minute IPA. So, those are all the decision factors that you have to think about when you're making, marketing decisions. We don't have the budgets that a lot of the competitors that have entered the market have. So, we have to squeeze as much juice out of every decision we make. It has to be impactful.
Yeah. Natalie, how about for you guys?
I think we really draw two different lines. In our core beers, these are beers that aid occasions. So the partnerships and the sponsorships that we enter into around those offerings really are about the occasions, and can they lift up that line of our offerings and really celebrate that? Does it aid the consumer? Does it add value? Is it a part of an experience that brings them joy? Is Boulevard's beer offering there an amplification of something that's really special? For our smokestack offerings, these are the beers that we position as the occasion. So our partnerships and sponsorships are viewed a little bit differently. We really focus on things that I would say amplify that occasion, but don't create the occasion as a whole.
So you use the word experience, and JC, I think that's a pretty appropriate word to describe a lot of how you guys approach what you do every single day. It's all about the experience. Can you explain for everyone here today what the Trillium experience is, as best you can, without having a Trillium beer in your hand and actually feeling it?
So Trillium is still very much in its infancy. For the longest time, we were operating out of our original location, which is effectively a shoebox in our Boston location. So to make a Seinfeld reference, it was kind of like the soup Nazi experience. He'd come in, you make your order, you stand to the left, and you kind of get your beer and you go. We couldn't even offer people even the smallest taste because we didn't have a restroom for people to use. So not much of an experience other than the anticipation for what it's going to be like when you get there. We had since changed that when we did our expansion at our Canton location, built the tap room for the relative demand that we had and the space that we were able to secure for the lease. It made absolutely no sense to then use 4,000 square feet of that space for the tap room and retail experience. We should have dedicated the entire thing to production space. But that didn't feel right to me because people wanted to come and visit and spend time, and I didn't want them to have to wait in line outside in the rain, et cetera, et cetera. So we made lots of non-intuitive business decisions that felt right as a customer. So it's sort of a long way of saying that even though we're really quite new, I always have an eye to what I would want if I was a customer from Trillium. Not only in the experience once you arrive, but the anticipation when you're going, once you're there, and the food truck offerings, and the music that we're playing, and the tap room associates that are kind of saying the words that I would say if I was there with them.
Seems like you sort of trust your gut for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, we started Trillium with one full-time employee. I kept my regular job for about 2 years after we opened, and didn't have a heck of a lot of time to sit down and write things out and vet them with a team and so on and so forth. You didn't really have the time for those kinds of things. I had to do things that felt right intuitively, and maybe it's the instincts that have gotten us to this point, and it certainly led to lots of business mistakes, but they turned out...
Such as?
Not being able to make enough beer to meet demand.
Yeah.
Not even close.
Something that a lot of breweries struggle with, I'm sure.
Right. But we should have contract brewed, right? But that didn't feel right to me, so we didn't do it.
Right. How do you scale that? How do you, if you're trusting your gut, and at some point, you get to a point in your life cycle where you maybe need to turn over some of that decision making to somebody else, how does it scale if you're not the one pulling the trigger?
Well, that's what Esther and I are always going to be the one making those decisions. So we don't have investors to make sure we're maximizing our returns. We have vision, and we've set a strategy towards achieving that vision. And even though that the business decisions might not be the most efficient way to make the most money, it'll be what we feel is the most efficient way to maintain that ownership to achieve that vision.
And so much of what you guys do is based on the beer itself. I think your partnership, the Beer Garden on the Greenway, was really about just giving people in Boston their first outdoor beer garden experience last year. And now you've got a lot of competition in that space this summer. Everybody is jumping in and getting into the beer garden game. As more and more, and this is a question for all of you, as more and more craft breweries begin to execute partnerships at, say, the sporting level with the Royals or with the White Sox, and craft breaks through to those opportunities, I feel like each of those experiences that you're trying to deliver, it's going to be tougher and tougher. Have you guys thought about the next 12, 18 months, 2 years, and how those things might change and what you guys might do when they do change? Sure.
So we signed the agreement with the Royals last year. This is year 2 for us. It's off to a rocky start, sadly, but based on the team and the weather. We were really excited by this. This was a huge opportunity for Boulevard to have this sponsorship as the official craft beer of a Major League Baseball team. And when we looked around, it was really cool and really terrifying because there was not a roadmap. There was no exact playbook for how to do this as a craft beer and feel like we kept our authenticity and who we were, but integrated a team into our narrative, something very big, something very polished. So last year was really heavily focused on getting the stadium and the experience at the stadium to be this immersive Boulevard experience. We were really lucky in that how we created this was 6 different locations in Kauffman Stadium. Every one of them felt like a little part of the Boulevard Beer Hall or our Tours and Rec Center or us, essentially. Everything was polished. We got a lot of time training the team at Kauffman. We had a really, really strong focus on what the beer was and what we were talking about and what we wanted the team to deliver. So at the end of the day, the Boulevard experience at that stadium felt as close as we could possibly make it to someone actually coming to visit our brewery just a few miles away. Fast forward a little bit, and I think as we enter year 2, year 3, 4, 5 of this relationship, it's about how else we can partner with it that is writing the narrative for craft beer. And that's exciting. Sometimes you're pulling levers that feel a little big beer, but we're trying to find interesting and new and very authentic ways to do it. So,
Can you give us an example of one of those levers that feels like big beer?
yeah, I mean,
And I'm
think,
assuming it's not like paying for a tap handle, because that never happens.
No, never. No, I mean, we're lucky in the stadium. We have hundreds and hundreds of handles in the stadium. You go there, and it feels like a Boulevard destination. We're really fortunate for that, and so much of that has to do with the city. That really embraced us. But outside of it, how we leverage that, I would say, to retail is a good example. So whether it's ticket giveaways, this is the Royals' 50th year anniversary, so we're doing a big thing with them, leveraging a lot of their partnerships and their other sponsors in giveaways and in parties and tailgates. Some of it feels at sometimes a little formulaic, but we're trying to put our special spin on it, and at the end of the day, make it feel really us. And how we do that ultimately is really stellar execution with our retailers, really amazing prize experiences with our fans. When they win something, they feel totally immersed and feel like Boulevard's giving them a big giant hug of win. So at the end of the day, I think it's worked really well for us, and we're going to keep figuring out the right way to do it. It's not a perfect playbook, and I don't think we have the answers, but we're charting the course in some capacity, and we have good company.
Yeah, and I think that balance of, authenticity or doing something that feels authentic to the brand or is authentic to the brand, balancing that with some of the more structured promotional marketing tactics that have been deployed over the years by larger companies can be sort of a tricky tightrope to walk. Neal, you guys at Dogfish have done a pretty incredible and remarkable job over the years of always remaining really authentic to the brand of Dogfish. How have you maintained that authenticity as you guys have grown? And how do you continue to maintain it as you get sort of more mature in everything that you do?
Yeah, I would say, probably 2 years ago, we started asking ourselves what the definition of off-centered is. Off-centeredness is at the center of who we are as a brand. And it was one of those things, it was nice that all of our coworkers kind of had this different definition of what off-centeredness was, and we still want to maintain that. But for our consumers, we wanted it to be a little bit more authentic. I think we wanted it to be a little bit more consistent so that we could spread that out, whether it was regionally or nationally, maybe internationally at some point. So, I think, as you were saying, Natalie, I think you kind of know when something fits nicely. And for me, as I look at, you guys being at Kauffman Stadium, it feels right. You guys are a Kansas City brand, and it's nice to know that consumers have embraced that. We have a few sponsorships like that we feel like is just a natural fit. We're the sponsor of the Firefly Music Festival, which is right up the road in Dover, Delaware. It's the biggest music festival on the East Coast. And we've seen research from Red Frog Events who come back to us and they say, you guys are such an important part of this festival. And we try to leverage that into, getting more out of that event and extracting as much value out of it as possible. But I think it really comes down to, getting as much value out of it, from a variety of different angles so that you can integrate your social media, you can integrate your PR, you can activate it at retail. The more that you can kind of put that event or that sponsorship at the center of the page and have all these like kind of tentacles coming out from it, that's where you get the most value. And again, it's a competitive space, limited budgets. You have to do that on a daily basis.
Yeah. So I got a couple follow-ups there. Can you provide us with an example of maybe something that's failed and why you think it failed or why it didn't work and why maybe it didn't feel, in hindsight, totally Dogfish?
Yeah, we dipped our toe into the water of bigger sports sponsorships. We sponsored the Philadelphia Union, which is an MLS team up in Philadelphia, obviously. And we got a pretty good response from consumers. We had our own little kind of beer garden area. I would say it didn't work. Soccer is an interesting sport. I'm a bigger fan of baseball because you can drink all 9 innings. With soccer, people show up early, they drink, and then they watch the game for 45 minutes. Watch the match, sorry. Got to use soccer terminology here. But they watch the match for 45 minutes, and then they go drink another beer, and they take that back. So there wasn't enough consumption for it to meet those metrics that we kind of outlined for that. And so we fulfilled our obligation there, and then we went a different direction.
Yeah. JC, do you guys have a sort of core value at Trillium? Neal talked about having everybody at Dogfish explain what off-centered means to them. Is there something like that at Trillium? And if so, what is it? And how do you sort of bring that to life out in the trade?
It's funny. I was just talking to the orchestrated beer guys about this. Trillium was originally envisioned to be a farm and brewery someday. Kind of hard to imagine that as a 2,300 square foot space in the middle of Boston, a farm and brewery. It's kind of a silly concept. So 5 years isn't super long in the lifetime of a person, but that still remains, Esther, in my vision for what Trillium is to be. So it's a little bit hard to connect those dots between what it is that we're doing. We're commissioning a new canning line today, guys. It's all for the farm, It's a little bit hard to do that for the average person, So I know I kind of make the joke every once in a while to our team, and I say, "Oh man, we sold a lot of beer today. We're gonna get goats soon." It's kind of it's a funny thing, but I think there's just sort of a momentum around the excitement about what we're doing every day. That's kind of the day-to-day, week-to-week connection of what our team has to what Trillium is today and the eventual incarnation to that farm and brewery, and how it's sort of grown and blossomed to eventually have our flagship restaurant and brewery in Boston later this year, and then once again having that beer garden on the Greenway this summer. It's not even, those things weren't even on our wish list. But over the course of the 5 years, they've grown into become those intuitive kind of milestones for us to reach to on a daily basis.
So you see those as sort of a means to an end, in a way?
No, it's just sort of the maturation for what Trillium, how it was originally conceived, and then how it's kind of grown and blossomed into its own thing. I think that if anybody had told me when we first started that we were going to have a 500-person beer garden in the middle of the city, I was like, that sounds great. There's no fucking way that's happening. There are no beer gardens in the city. That's not something that Boston would ever do. And it became an opportunity, and we say no, 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 and then, oh, wait, what's this thing? And we went for it, and last year, Boston had its first beer garden. That's incredible. And we got to celebrate that as a team, and it just felt right for everybody. So you can't necessarily carve out the path that you're going to lead in your life. I'd never imagined I was going to be sitting on a stage talking to folks about how we approach building a brewery.
Yeah.
And here I am.
How do you keep people within the company believing in your grand vision as you guys grow? I imagine that's got to be a pretty tough thing to accomplish the more people you add.
Yeah, like I said, we started with one person, and now we're at about 100, and we're about to add 100 more. So how do I maintain that personal, direct connection if I spend 10 minutes with each one of our team every week, and now it's going to be 200 people? It's sort of a very difficult thing to do. So the most that I can do is kind of have that direct, super tight connection with certain people in our team, know everybody's name, and then have that translated and propagated out to the rest of the team.
Yeah, yeah. You got to keep people believing in your vision. You got to make sure that everybody is on board with what you guys are trying to execute. And I think that for a lot of emerging, mid-size, breweries that are growing to sort of that next step, adding more people, potentially, new folks that are entirely new to the segment, haven't worked for a brewery before, that can be challenging. Natalie, do you guys have some strategies for onboarding folks with your vision and your the brand identity and articulating that internally so that when they go out externally, it's consistent?
Absolutely, and at the same time, not at all. I would say it is a lot of opportunity for improvement here. No, as someone who joined the brewery just a year and a half ago, I went through this and was a part of kind of a new wave of onboarding and training, and got to have a lot of analysis and recap and adjustment after the fact. We do a huge immersive brewery rotation, so everybody that comes on board at Boulevard or Duvel USA spends time with every single department: brewing, production, packaging, supply chain, finance, tours and rec, marketing, sales, everyone. You spend time selling in the field, you spend time learning and appreciating our accounting team, so every single effort at the brewery is really appreciated and you understand who to go to. But when we talk about hiring, I would say first and foremost, so much of what we do is really about hiring great people, whether they've been in the field of beer or outside of it. Sometimes it's just about really excited, smart, genius, fresh blood, and making sure that they are fired up and they have the same entrepreneurial passion as the rest of us. Because when we hire great people, they inspire great people, and we make great products, and we do great things.
Neal, you guys have hired, what, like 80-something people in the last 18 months or so?
at least, yeah.
Yeah. How do you know that each one of those people out in the field are communicating, what you're creating in the marketing department that is Dogfish and everything that you want it to be? How do you ensure that those people are, sharing in your vision and communicating it out in the trade?
Yeah, two things. So we have an onboarding process that's pretty similar. So Cindy, our VP of HR, is here, and she created, with her team, created a day or a kind of a week, actually, for new coworkers called Carnival, where they spend time with departmental leads, and they get immersed in everything that is Dogfish. And it doesn't matter, what role you play at Dogfish, you participate in that program. And that's a great thing for onboarding people, teaching them about the brand, giving them education on beer. And I would say the second thing is, just keeping things really simple. I always think of things of like, that game of Secret, where you start with one place around the table and you pass it around the table and then you see what that statement was at the end. And, we work in a 3-tier industry, and there are a lot of people at that table, and that message that you give at the beginning most likely will be different. So the more that you can simplify that, the better chance you have of that being consistent at the end.
That's a really great way of putting it. That game of Secret has got to be more challenging, especially now that the environment has changed so much. It used to be, a handful of established brands selling a few core products. Now it's 6,000 plus breweries selling 10,000 plus different SKUs to off-premise retailers, and each, some brands are in and out in a matter of weeks. And so that messaging and that articulation of that message can be a pretty dubious process, I would imagine. How do each of you guys ensure that you guys are kind of staying focused on what you need to stay focused on, everything is consistent, and how have the strategies changed as the marketplace has evolved, just to be more locally focused, more regionally focused with a bunch of different SKUs as opposed to more nationally focused with a handful of SKUs?
Hang on, let me take a drink here. More liquid truth serum, please.
We're empty.
Yeah, so, again, it is about simplification. What we've done is we've narrowed down, our annual production calendar to fewer brands. The challenge there is when you delete a brand from your production calendar, you gotta find a way to fill that void from a volume perspective. But I think it's a bit counterintuitive. It takes guts to make that decision. But I think time will prove that by making those gutsy decisions and providing focus to all those people that are in that chain of communication, you're probably going to find more success at the end.
You guys are adding brands, though, right, Natalie?
Yes and no. I mean, we're definitely trying to go at it with the same level of focus. And, think where we're adding, we are definitely deleting at least one or two, making bets on volume and GP and opportunity of the future versus what was in the past. But similarly, I would say I think where we have been able to drive the most focus and for our company has been really creating innovation paths. So when we know, our brewers are so awesome and they're creating such beautiful, amazing beers, and it's finding places for those beers to go, whether it's our tasting room into our test series or our tasting room series, which sounds insane that I just said that, in our sample packs, our Brewer's Barrel series, all kinds of different things. I think we've found channels for all of these innovations that are efficient, that don't kind of bottleneck the system, if you will, for our distributors and our sales team.
So I know we've only got a few more minutes together up here, and I want to get a couple more questions in. Thank you to the beer runners. So the one question I really did want to hit on, show of hands, how many brewery owners or brewery reps are in the room today? Perfect. How many of you guys, in some way or another, rely on a founder story for a lot of what you guys send out to consumers and talk about how you started as a core piece of your marketing? Show of hands. So, and I think that's, that's something that everybody kind of leans on initially, and all of your brands at one time or another, and perhaps probably still to this day, lean on the founder to some respect. So I guess my question would be, if I had to ask it to Neal, and I'll ask it to all you guys, but how do you avoid putting Sam Calagione in all of your marketing videos? Do we? Yeah. Especially as you guys grow and you start to pull away from that founder story so that consumers can become attached to the brand as opposed to the personality.
So, for us, Sam is an asset. Is that good that I called you an asset, or is that bad? Yeah. And I'll fill you guys in on a secret. There's actually 3 Sams. You've seen them around a lot. There's 3 robots that,
This is like Westworld. Yeah.
No, really, Sam is an asset for us, and so we try to utilize that at the right times. We're active on social media. I think most craft breweries are. So when Sam has time, and it does require a lot of planning on our part to get time on his calendar and make sure that we get good content out of that time that we have with him. But it is part of it's part of who we are as Dogfish. Sam is consistently, I'll repeat something that Sam said many times. He's our analog voice. Mariah has been our digital voice for a long time. So Sam is the guy who's talking to people, and he's online. And that's something that we want to accentuate in the future. I think we'd be silly if we didn't. So we're doing things with Men's Health Magazine, where we're creating custom content that Sam is kind of the star. We're working with Complex and First We Feast to bring back a series called That's Odd, Let's Drink It, where Sam is the host of that. And it is Dogfish centric, but it's also promoting craft beer as a category. So,
you're doubling down on it, it seems.
Yeah. Yes.
Boulevard, obviously in a little different situation, especially since John sold the brewery a number of years ago. As you guys have kind of stepped back and pulled away from him as sort of the personality and the spark behind the brand, what's changed, and how has it changed for the better, and what's that process been like?
Sure. I think it's been a really fascinating one. John McDonald was an amazing founder and remains a really steady moral compass for the brewery today. He still comes in. He still has his arms in a lot of things, and we're very, very lucky for that. And I wouldn't say it's a big but, we're on to the next phase, but it's an and. We have the opportunity to write the next chapter with him a part of it, and him shepherding what we do and how we do it, and really giving his opinions. And we're really lucky because we have the benefit of having a founder who's ready to step back and not be present, but who's guiding us into the next step and ready for that to happen, which is humbling and awesome.
JC, you've talked to me about just the work-life balance and wanting to maintain some sanity even as you guys grow. And you are very heavily involved in the business, obviously, and will continue to be for the foreseeable future. And I think you said last week, like, you don't want to put a tap room in Chicago or San Francisco because that would just pull you in a bunch of different directions. And I'll go on the record and say you probably should, because I think those would succeed and do quite well in those markets. But for you, I mean, you did have a big piece of the brand. So much of the brand was built around what you and Esther created. So as you guys grow and the brewery grows and you guys get a little bit older, how do you let Trillium exist as Trillium, or maybe it is already?
Well, we've tried to start to do a little bit of the separation where it sounds kind of simple, but we just kind of created our own separate Instagram pages for either of us. But of course, they're Mr. and Mrs. Trillium. So we're just so intrinsically wound up with what it is. And I never felt comfortable with people coming up to me and asking me about, hey, how'd you do this? This is great. And what did you do? And what about this? And I want your opinion, and you and you and you. I always felt uncomfortable with that because I just wanted people to appreciate the place and the beer that we had brewed. So I never set out for any kind of beer celebrity status or anything like that.
Well, then I'm sorry we put you in front of 350 people here.
Yeah. Not to say that it's not like completely awesome. It's just it was never a goal of mine necessarily, and I kind of tend to come back a little bit to that. But kind of driving into work one day, Esther and I were talking about, so where does Trillium stop and we begin? And it's we're kind of woven into it. So ultimately, I think what does that mean for Trillium is it's kind of for a lot of people. It's the embodiment of the American dream, and it's the husband and wife team pursuing what they love, and it just taking off like a rocket. And a lot of people can identify with that, and it's such an incredible thing. So I don't know that there will ever be a true separation, because that is our story. And how does that evolve over time? It's just like I never thought we'd have a beer garden, and we're doing it again this year. Am I going to sit on the stage more and talk about the American dream more? Maybe. I don't really have a marketing plan. Can you tell?
That's it.
I just want to have some goats.
It's very Jim Cook-esque of you. He doesn't have an exit plan. It's just to die, I think,
Right.
is what he says, right? Yeah.
Hopefully our kids want the brewery someday. I know you hear a lot of brewery owners say that, but that's kind of the plan.
Yeah. Well, one final question for you guys. What has been, and totally non-marketing related, just a soundbite to leave everyone with before they go get another round of beers and we bring our next panel up? What has been one, sort of surprising development in 2018, just in the craft category in general, that you guys have paid attention to? And maybe one piece of advice that you'd leave with everyone today, marketing or otherwise? I'll start with Neal.
Let's see. One interesting development and one piece of advice.
Yep.
We had some meetings with distributors today, and I'll say it's an interesting thing, but it's a really good thing. I'm hearing distributors get really interested and involved in the health of brands and the marketing of brands, and I think it's really on both suppliers and distributors to build strong brands. And I think that's what's going to, really help the beer industry long term. Strong brands are going to lead to a strong category. So I'm hearing that from distributors. I think there was maybe a time where there was this separation of breweries have to own the marketing, and I'm hearing distributors get very involved in that, and that's a great thing. One piece of advice, I'd say planning. I mean, that's something that we think about a lot in marketing. JC and I were talking before the panel today, and you got to be thinking about what's happening a year from now, every day of the year. If you're thinking about what's happening next week or next month, that's already passed. So you got to be thinking about what's happening a year from now, because that's the timeline that we work on. That's the timeline of selling things in properly. That's the timeline of communicating things properly. That allows you to simplify that communication process.
I'm only thinking about what's happening in like 45 minutes from now, so I guess I'm screwed. Natalie, one piece of advice for our audience and one surprising development this year that you've noticed.
You know, I would say one surprising development I've noticed has really been kind of the disconnect between, I would say, what we have as an industry created for consumers' drive for new beers, new limiteds, new seasonals, new, and the pressure from our distributors and retailers finally saying uncle. I think at some point, too much is too much. So how we manage that as an industry is something that I'm anxious to be a part of, and hopefully collectively we will solve. One piece of advice I would say, I'm going to credit back to John Kane of Central States in Kansas City, our fantastic distributor. He is such an inspiring guy, but said it best, we have to get back to romancing beer. We have to get back to talking about quality and taste and occasion and proper glasses and clean glasses and pours, and I think there's something so beautiful about that. So that's how I believe as an industry we're going to get back to health, getting back to romancing beer.
And JC, the final word.
So I think one of the surprising things that happened to me this year was sort of so some of the old guard kind of pushing back for so long and then kind of flipping the other way and then doing national hazy beer. We were getting stomped on for so long about this ridiculous beer they were making, kind of quietly and sometimes not so quietly, and then to see it kind of flip the other way was a kind of maybe not surprising because you can only ignore what was happening for so long. So that was kind of cool, but a little scary at the same time for us. And a piece of advice, I think it is to take what your historical perspective is and accelerate that by about 3 to 4x about what's happening. I think in the comments that you're making about the new, what was available last week is already old. It's unbelievable. Yeah, I've had people come up to me and say, oh man, I love this beer, I love this beer. I'm like, that's great, we have it. Then they turn around and say, well, what else do you have? It's unbelievable. Like people will say, this is my favorite beer, what else do you have?
I don't envy you.
It's fun because it allows me to continue to pursue this myriad of ideas that I still have not yet run at yet. It's not an endless road either, so that's also a little scary.
So get back to romancing beer, accelerate your timeline, and plan accordingly. Those are the takeaways. Guys, this has been brilliant. Thank you. Round of applause for our first panelist. So I'm sure everyone needs a beer. Let's all go have a beer for the next 20 or 30 minutes, and we'll reconvene.